The God Emperor of all mankind is arguably the most important character in all of Warhammer 40k. Yet what is not up for debate is that he is most definitely one of its most infamous. Opinions about the Emperor range from those who view him as a tragic messiah figure to naught but a despotic evil tyrant playing at God. Irregardless what you may think of the Emperor had a plan that failed, and spectacularly so. The Emperor's failure can be chalked up to one incredibly pivotal moment, one incredibly pivotal failure that was sadly overlooked by the greatest of our kind. Yet what was this failure? And more importantly, why is it that because of who the Emperor is, he was destined to commit this mistake again and again? That, ladies and gents, is what we're going to find out with today's video. Salutations Rangers, my name is General Bradley 101, and without any further ado, strap on in, buckle up, and let's get crack-a-lackin' on with today's video. Yet before we can understand what this mistake is, and why the Emperor was destined to make it, we need to know who is the Emperor, and what was his plan. The Emperor is part of a subspecies of humanity, known as a Perpetual. A Perpetual is a human being who is for all intents and purposes immortal, but that is only one of their many abilities. To be a Perpetual is to be as a star in the night sky, incredibly unique and utterly unobtainable. The Emperor, however, will be the greatest even amongst their hallowed ranks, and through his many years, he was sought to use his power to guide humanity. But ultimately, the Emperor would come to a realization, that being, humanity needed to be set in a right path once and for all, lest something terrible and evil befall us. And this was not just an irrational fear conjured by an old man, but rather, it was something that had happened and would happen again, taken from Master of Mankind. Here among the Eldar, all was at peace. He saw orbital platforms of sorcery-spun bone, so delicate that a breath of solar wind would surely shatter their tenuous frailty. He saw lush worlds of vegetation, where spires of crystal and psychically sung wraithbone formed great spires and connected walkways, while webway gates flared with endless use inside the towers of grand bloodlines. He saw a race crying out for more, always for more. For music that stimulated their biology of their brains, for wine that sent fire through their nervous systems, for entertainment and pleasures that replaced dignity with the harmony of madness. He saw things wearing Eldar skin, moving in the shadows of their society, caressing with blades, killing with biting kisses, drinking blood, and eating forbidden flesh with filed fang smiles. The truth burst from pale alien flesh. It erupted free. Claws tore Eldar open from within. Doorways of bloody meat, ripping open in bodies and minds grown soft by decadence and indolence. Warp things crawled from ears, from nostrils, from tear ducts, shattering the skulls of their hosts as they swelled and grew. Daemons of hybrid gender, as much scorpion as maiden and men, shrieked newborn, and blood wet at the burning skies. And far, far from such horrors, the human race was locked away in the isolation of old night, a million different worlds, with no capacity to contact one another, each one alone in the fiery twilight of eternal warp storms raking through true space. Only as one species died could another rise. The Eldar fell, damned by their own vices eating into the wards around their psychic souls. Warp storms that had racked every world bled away, focusing in final clusters. The Maelstrom, the Oculus Malefica, and others far lesser besides. The human race rises, old night giving way to the dawn, as the eternal storms recede. A new godling had been born.
Slaanesh!
The Eldar weeping cry.
Slaanesh! Slaanesh!
But the rest of the silently sudden galaxy takes its first breaths in a new age. Ships begin to sail, stellar empires form. One of these empires will become the only empire, the Imperium of Man, the twin kingdoms of Terra and Mars, binding together to conquer the now serene night sky. A crusade, then an empire, all beneath one man's banner. Everything that has happened will happen again. It is the way of such things. Yet humanity's death will eclipse the Eldar's annihilation tenfold. For we are evolving into a far more psychically powerful race. Uncontrolled psychic energy will tear reality apart. The warp entities will feed on the carcass of the galaxy. There must be control, and control must be maintained. Control, Ra repeated. The scale of such ambition, the necessity of it, lest mankind face a far harsher extinction than the Eldar. Their souls shine bright within the warp, drawing the predations of the beast within its tides. Soon, every human soul will become a beacon of fire. How? Ra wondered. How can you know? What other unbelievable futures have you foreseen? How can evolution itself be conquered and controlled? Through vision, Ra, we see the warp as an alternate reality. And this is so. It is a mirror, reflecting our every thought and action, every hate, every death, every nightmare and dream. Echoing into eternity, we break into this place, into a realm that harbors the pain and suffering of every man and woman and child to ever live. And we use it to sail between the stars. Because we must. Because until now, there has been no other choice. The webway, Ra murmured into the silent night. The webway. Mankind is ascending, Ra. Humanity is taking a great developmental step, evolving into a psychic race. Uncontrolled psychers and lodestones for the warp's touch. A species comprising them would suffer as the Eldar suffered. And for the Eldar, this evolutionary juncture was their final step before destruction. I will not let humanity be destroyed by the same fate. The Eldar had the answers within their grasp, but were too naive and too proud to save themselves. They had the webway, which could have been their salvation, but they never fully severed their connection to their warp. Their soul fires drew damnation upon their entire species. Ra knew this, yet it had never been related to him in these exact words, flavored as they were by the promise of prophecy. Within the webway, humanity would need no navigators. They would never need to rely on the unreliable warp whispers of astropaths. Vessels would never enter the warp, to be lost or torn apart by the entities that dwelt within. But the Eldar had done the same, had they not? No. They eradicated their reliance on the warp, but they never severed their species' connection to it. I will do that for humanity, once and for all. Ra twisted in the nothingness, turning to stare at the light of so many distant stars. He faced terror, without knowing how he knew its direction, only knowing that he was right. One of those pinprick starlights was Sol, so far away. I have conquered humanity's cradle world. I have conquered the galaxy in order to shape mankind's development as it last evolves into a psychic race. No isolated pockets of our species may remain free, lest in their ignorance they invite destruction upon us all. I have shattered the hold of faith and fear over the human mind. Superstition and religion must continue to be outlawed, for they are easy doors for the warped denizens to enter the human heart. This is what we have already done, and soon I will offer humanity a way of interstellar travel without reliance upon Geller fields and navigators. I will offer them a means of communication between worlds without the reliance of warped dreams of astropaths. And when the Imperium shields the entire species within the laws of my Pax Imperialis, when humanity is freed from the warp and united beneath my vision, I can at last shepherd mankind's growth into a psychic race. The Primarchs, thought Ra, the Thunder Legion, the Unification Wars, the Great Crusade, the Space Marine Legions, the Imperial Truth, the Webway Project, the black ships with psychers huddled in the holds, watched over by the Silent Sisterhood. It is all about control. Tyranny is not the end, Ra. Absolute control is but the means to the end. The hubris. Ra couldn't fight the insidiously treacherous thought to see the hidden depths of his master's ambitions. The sheer, unrivaled hubris. The necessity. The Emperor's voice was iced iron. Not arrogance, not vainglory. Necessity. I have told you, Ra. Humans need rulers. Now you see why. A single murder is on one end of the spectrum, for rulers bring law. The hope of the entire race is at the far end of the continuum, for I, as ruler, bring salvation. And here, ladies and gentlemen, we see the Emperor's plan, his ultimate goal. Mankind was becoming, in essence, a successor to the Eldar, not directly via genomes or bloodways, but rather for where we would occupy our place in the galaxy as the prime civilization, the apex of Imperium. That is what we were becoming. The Emperor saw this. The Emperor knew this. The Emperor also knew the Eldar, so far advanced and above us, fell to a fate worse than death, to have their souls slowly ate at for all of wretched eternity. The Emperor saw what was coming. He knew humanity would never unite on its own. He knew that humanity would take too long in deliberation and in thought. The Emperor knew what we needed, and he knew we did not have the time for it to occur naturally. So the Emperor decided he would drag us into a brand new age, kicking, screaming, howling, crying, and begging. For the Emperor did not care if we hated him, so long as we were alive to hate him. Hubris is one hell of a thing, and many of us would indeed have the same reaction to Ra, the sheer hubris of the Emperor's actions. For yes, he was powerful, but what on earth could make him think in such a way? What happened to him? What is this? Why? And the truth is, the Emperor's hubris did not just come out of nowhere, for it turns out the Emperor is much more than even we thought. Taken from Saturnine.
He's not just more powerful. He is a different order of magnitude. A freak.
Really? That made him smile.
An aberration, even in terms of the perpetual line, which itself is an aberration. You asked why we had never come together to stop him, or contain him. There are many reasons, most of them trivial or personal, but the main one is that even together en masse, the perpetuals do not begin to match his power. We have many talents, many powers. But what we are, transcendent mortals who have often influenced the course of human life and achieved great things. We have been guides and steersmen, pilots and mentors, sometimes to whole nations and peoples. But he is something else altogether, an engine of change, a font of power.
A god? He asked.
Not at all. At heart, he is a man. He has a personality. He has traits and flaws. All of these are magnified, of course. He is truly quite wonderful, kind, funny.
Honestly?
Yes, funny, witty, articulate, passionate, incisive, clever beyond genius, charismatic, devoted, driven, determined. From the earliest days of his life, he did what we all did. He saw his own power and tried to use it. He tried to steer mankind towards a better future. He tried to raise the human race up to achieve its potential. And of course, because of his power, he was rather more effective than most of us.
Is that what perpetuals do then? Asked John. Is that what they are? Erda sat up and looked at him. Her eyes were as blue as crystals.
John, I tell you truly, I have lived a long life, and I have no idea what perpetuals are. I am one, and I do not know. There are theories. Some seem convincing. The one I favor is that we are the next version of the human species.
Perpetuals are already a step above common humanity, yet the Emperor is without a single shadow of a doubt the greatest of us all. The longer you are alive, the more you know. The more you know, the more you think you are right, and the more you think you know better than others. The Emperor is the oldest human being there is. Of course, he would have hubris. So if you were the greatest of your species, wouldn't you think that you also would know best? So we know who the Emperor is. We know what his plans were. But then why did he do things the way that he did them? Why was the Great Crusade conducted in such a unique manner? And that, ladies and gentlemen, is because the Great Crusade was on a time limit. Humanity was approaching psychic coalescence, the new birth, so it was. A birth similar to the one that spawned Slanesh and damned the Eldari. If humanity was not under the care of the Emperor and in the webway by the time that happened, our species would be damned. Thus the Emperor acted in all haste. Speed was his key. That's why he chose warfare. That's why he did things that conflicted with one another. That's why his behavior was so erratic. Always, the Emperor chose the most expedient option. Not the best, not the wisest, not the one that would lead to the right outcome. The quickest. Always. And ultimately, that answers many of the questions that people have about the Emperor, a prime example being the Primarchs. The Emperor allowed them to call him father. He called them son. He did many a fatherly thing, and acted in kindness and warmth to some of them. Yet in the end, he thought of them as a tool. Nothing more, hopefully nothing less. Taken from Master of Mankind. Ra. The Emperor greeted him. The worthies around them both continued speaking, no longer paying either of them any heed at all. All of this, the custodian said. He gestured not only to the Primarchs, but to the amassed pomp itself, the geoscape continent, the sky pregnant with dropships, the gathering regimental masses weeping and cheering below. Why, sire? I have never asked it then, and I have always wondered since. Why all of this? For glory, the Emperor replied, to honor the creatures that call themselves my sons, my necessary tools. They feed on glory as if it were a palpable sustenance. Their own glory, of course, no different from the kings and emperors of old. It scarcely crosses their mind that glory matters nothing to me. I could have had a planet's worth of glory anytime I wished it when I walked in the species' shadow through prehistory. Only 3 of them ever thought to ask why I timed my emergence as I did. Speed was everything to the Emperor. He sacrificed it all. Morals, ethics, anything that he had held true to. The Emperor was willing to do anything and everything to ensure that he had control of humanity before we had awoken psychically. No line wouldn't be crossed. No zone was too great. No undertaking too dramatic or evil. The Emperor would do anything, and he did everything. Indeed, the Emperor was seemingly alone in his pure and utter determination and understanding. For even his fellow perpetuals, those who he surrounded himself with, were aghast at such propositions. Taken from Saturnine.
Most of us divorced ourselves from his efforts. He was taking risks. One by one, perpetuals allied to him slipped away. He was glad to see some of them back, I think. He was tired of their objections and weary of their caution. He wanted results. He became angry with the minds that could not match his speed of thought and his genius. So most of us left him. They went away into other lives, or went into hiding, or left the homeworld. A few stayed. The Sigillite, of course. He was always married to the cause. And, as I say, I stayed longer than I should have.
Erda, what risk was he taking? John asked.
The acceleration, John. He had no patience. He believed he knew everything he needed to know. He constantly pushed ahead. That's the irony. We are immortals, but he couldn't bear to waste time. Natural evolution takes millions of years. He refused to wait that long. He'd worked for 30,000 years and felt that that was more than enough time. The natural stewardship of the perpetuals, born through the evolutionary cycle, was not rapid enough for his needs. So once most of the natural perpetuals had left his side, he built his own.
The Primarchs, John whispered.
The Primarchs,
she said with a small nod. They are not actual perpetuitae, in any biological sense.
They are the artificial equivalents of the perpetuals, functionally immortal beings, born from his blood, and power, and vigor. Coded to accelerate his program even faster, they were designed to live long enough to see his plan through to the end, and not die away so quickly the way humans did. They were indoctrinated from birth to follow his word, and not have opinions of their own, like naturally occurring perpetuals. They were made to service his dream. He took what nature had wrought in the perpetuals, and he built his own pathologicized version, and through them, their genetic lineages, the legions.
He didn't do that alone. Erda was silent for a moment. Outside, the desert air sighed, and the neck bells of the livestock clunked.
He did not. I was still with him then, one of the last few. Me, my colleague Astate, a few others. I had misgivings. We all did. But he was very convincing, compelling, and by then, he had become more powerful than ever. He needed a geneticist to work with him, and that was my art. And he needed a biological source, a gene stock rare enough to mix with his own, a perpetual.
You.
Me. I was the other source, a genetic donor. He is the father of mankind, and I, the surrogate mother, and the clinician, and the midwife. We made 20 fine sons, but he allowed me no influence. I was just a biological instrument. And once they were born, I began to properly understand the future he had prepared for them. The bitter destiny, the aggressively rapid and unnaturally savage evolutionary jumpstart he was driving towards. No good ever comes of coercing nature, John. Through his sons, he would force the human race into the future, force it into submission, and defy the warp to do it. He had built artificial perpetual analogues and weaponized them. Ready to resist the unbending cosmos, he was planning a crusade to retake the stars, to claim back in a bloody century or two what had taken millennia to lose in the first place. That was when I stepped away too. Astarte stayed and finished the work on the Gene Legion build, but I left. I was heartbroken and bereft, but I stepped away. I tried, John, but I did not stop him.
Will you try again?
No, John. It's too late.
Please.
Everything is broken, John.
All's not coming. I can't do this alone.
Perhaps you shouldn't.
Why not?
My fundamental objection to Neof's great work is his haste and urgency to supplant the natural flow of life with an artificial version that tramples ethics and morality and wise prudence. Artificial perpetuals, John. That was his plan. And look, see how it has worked. And you, John, earlier, you chided me and my kind for not taking action. You called us derelict, that we had not made a concerted effort to block Neof's progress, and that we should feel ashamed that you, a fake and neophyte immortal, should be doing what we should have long since done. You are an artificial perpetual too, in a way, John. Or at least, you were. I have no reason to trust your judgment, for you, like him, and my poor, accursed children, are trying to hasten the movement of fate.
The Emperor was fighting against time, not just Father Time, but Mother Nature as well. Everything that was preordained, every naturally conceived thing, everything that was set to happen, the Emperor railed against it in his hatred. It was all too slow. The Emperor refused, wholly, totally, and utterly, to leave the destiny of humanity's fate unto the whims of nature and time. He was the greatest of us all. If not him, then who? For even amongst the perpetuals, gods in their own right, he was greatest. Thus, the Emperor spat in the face of destiny. The Emperor would do everything in his power to ensure that humanity reached its molecular zenith in the culmination of psychic awakening, in the safety of his webway, under his Imperium of Man. Damned be anyone, son, brother, or former friend. That is why the Emperor bet his entire life's work, the entire life's work of all of humanity, on this one play. Yet the Emperor was not a god. But even if he was, I don't think he could have stopped what was coming. The fall of so many of his sons, and the intervention of chaos, ruined everything. The Emperor could not foresee the way the Chaos Gods would move, or he mistook them. He guessed wrong, and in the end, his old arch-enemies would finally gain victory, or a partial victory of that, taken from the End and the Death One. But the gods are against him, the false gods, the false four. They have been trying to thwart him since he began his work, for they know that his success will signal the end of them. Fearing his version of tomorrow, They have turned against him and undone the laws of the world. We have known disappointments before, failures, setbacks. Many times we have been forced to revise and fashion a modified path around an obstruction. One does not sustain a plan across 30 millennia without a degree of flexibility. We have known defeats, but not this. His plan is damaged. I'm not sure we can salvage it and set it back in motion. The words of Malkador the Sigillite, arguably the person who knew the most about the Emperor's plans, beside himself of course. The intervention of the Chaos Guards, the corruption of the Primarchs, the failures of humanity itself, all these factors combined would spell the end for the Emperor and his plans. For by the maledictions of the Demon Lord Tzeentch, Magnus the Red, his most psychically powerful son, would be tricked into breaking into the webway, trying to warn his father, yet accidentally setting up the hordes of damnation to invade the heart of humanity itself. Yet if this was so important to the Emperor, why didn't he try? Why didn't he fight? Why didn't he do something more? And in truth, the Emperor did all he could. He fought. Not just him, but his life wards, the Custodian Guard. The war in the webway is one of the most understood, yet most pivotal moment in all of the heresy, for it is in the war of the webway and its conclusion that the true end of Warhammer 40k, that being the Emperor's plan for it, finally came to its ultimate conclusion. The Emperor knew this, so the Emperor would stand and fight like the god kings he despised so much. And to his credit, he did have an impact. And in a sunless realm, the sun rose at last. The light of dawn was palpable on Ra's armor, as well as his skin. It was a pressure, a presence with searing physicality. The enemy hordes felt it as acid on their skin. The creatures, daemons, no matter what circular truths held strong, lost what little order they ever possessed. Ra heard their frantic agony as a sick scraping on the edges of his mind. His features were those of one born in the wild lands of ancient Eurasia. His skin was a Terran blend of bronze and burnt umber. His eyes darker still. His hair darkest of all. The long black fall of his hair was held by a simple circlet crown of metal leaves, binding the mane back from his face so that he could fight. More practical than regal. He moved as a man moved, coming through the straining ranks of his guardians on foot, pushing through the press of bodies on the rare instances they did not instinctively move aside for him. He wore gold, as all his guardians wore gold. The same sigils of Terran unity and imperial nobility that showed on their armor were cast thrice-fold upon his own. His armor joints did not growl with the crude industrial snarl of mass-manufactured legionary plate, but purred with the song of older, purer technologies. Held by a simple strap against his flowing red cloak was an ornate bolter of blackened bronze. In his hand he carried a sword, one that looked nothing like the blade portrayed in the victual murals and illustrated sagas. By the standards of Terran lords and kings, it was inarguably beautiful, but in the grip of the ruler of an entire species, it was, perhaps, rather plain. A weapon to wield, a tool for shedding blood, not an ornament to be admired. Impossibly complicated circuitry latticed its blade, black and copper against a silver so hallowed, it was almost blue. In other wars on worlds, he had greeted his custodians with subtle telepathy, speaking their names as he passed them before a battle. Here, he was more restrained, moving to the embattled front rank without offering any acknowledgement at all. Of the Neverborn, some broke ranks and fled, These cowardly shards of their vile masters knew that destruction had come. Some tore into each other, cannibalizing their kindred for strength in the face of destruction. Some lost what little grasp they had on corporeality, their forms melting and dissolving before the sword-wielding monarch even reached their lines. The strongest raged against the sin of his existence, with a gestalt bellow loud enough to shake the windless air of this alternate reality. They fought to reach their archenemy. Ra was at the Emperor's right side, spear whirling, lashing out to punch through the amorphous bodies of flailing blue creatures that wailed through their many mouths, sweat baked on his face inside his helm. The blood in his muscles was heavier than liquid lead. "Order, sire!" The Emperor raised his sword in a two-handed grip. As his knuckles tightened, the geography of the circuitry ignited along the blade's length, spitting electrical fire and wreathing the sword's length in flame. He didn't speak. He didn't look at any of his warriors. The sword came down, and the webway caught fire. Shapes ravaged in flames, shadows and suggestions doing battle with demons. Their fiery forms indistinct and ever-changing. The fireborn warriors of fallen 10,000, knee-deep in psychic fire and thrusting with lances of flame. The silhouettes of space marines, the betrayed dead of Istvan, bearing axes and blades and claws, half-seen sigils of slaughtered legions, obscured by the ash on their blackened armor. A giant among giants, its great hands bared and ready as it seared forwards at the crest of the tidal fire. The 10th son of a dying empire, so briefly reborn in his father's immolating wrath. Demons burned in their thousands, their etheric flesh seared from their false bones. White flame hollowed from the sword in corrosive, purifying radiance. It coruscated in thrashing waves from each fall of the Emperor's blade. To look upon him was to go blind. To stand before him was to die. Torrents of chemical fire marked Samando's position to Ra's left. Ra could hear the draconic roar of incendium pikes, burning the still thrashing creatures that had fallen beneath the blaze of the custodian's first rank. The 10,000 of their golden king were shin-deep in ash, the smoky specters of demonic entities flailing as they were swallowed by the Emperor's fire. The demons that managed to reach the Emperor suffered worst of all, the strongest, most savage of their kind. They swung their weapons at a man that was no longer there, cleaving through the golden mist that swirled in his place. With thunder cracks of psychic force, the golden warlord would appear at the beast's back, his flaming sword already buried in their spines. Fire erupted behind their eyes, boiling and bursting them from within. The sizzling gore soaked Ra and the custodians closest to their sire. Exaltation quickened Ra's blood, the cure to the weariest that had slowed him. He was tired beyond belief, yet that had never mattered so little. Each beat of his still living heart was vengeance. Vindication. We're winning. He could feel it in the renewed curses and oaths across the Vox as the 10,000 advanced. They weren't just holding their ground. Whatever genius the Emperor had worked in order to stand with them in this final hour had worked. Nothing could stand before them. The Emperor turned to Ra, hurling his sword as a spear. It lanced over the custodian's shoulder, driving to the hilt in the skull of a creature Ra barely even saw before it was reduced to burning sludge. In a flare of sun-enriched mist, the blade was back in the Emperor's hand, spinning, falling, killing. And still the Emperor advanced. A reptilian canine leapt at him only to rip through the air where he had been standing. It gurgled molten blood as the Emperor's sword manifested within its throat. The warlord clutched it in place for a second longer before ripping it free and moving on. Still the enemy came, a tide, a flood. Ra stole glances back to the Wraithbone gateway, so outstanding against the Mechanicum's machinery, watching robed unifiers passing into the blue mist, escorted by packs of the lost surviving Silent Sisters. Soon enough, only the 10,000 remained at their master's side. Whilst the War Master Horus threw every single thing he had against Terra, the 4 Dark Lords of Chaos, and Lord knows how many more demonic warp entities, threw every single strength they had against the webway for 5 years straight, second after second after second. The hordes of every single hell humanity had ever conjured in our infinite malice and hatred was spewed forth against naught but 10,000 demigods, hundreds of silent sisters, 3 titan legions, and a myriad of mechanicus warriors. Those few stood against the collective wrath of millennia of demon hatred. Against this, the Emperor could never win. He knew this, but still, the Emperor refused. He refused to let go. He refused to stop. He refused to admit defeat. Because the Emperor knew he bet on everything, on this one goal. If this goal died, so too would humanity. And everything that he had worked for, everything he had sacrificed, everyone he had sacrificed, all that was thrown away onto the altar of bringing humanity into the future would be fallen away into nothingness. But this isn't me talking. The Emperor said himself. "Hello, Diocletian," he said. The warrior stood in the dark, his spear held in a loose fist. He was helmless, breathing in the earthy smell of a million memories. "My liege," he said. Somehow his voice was a gunshot in the nothingness, breaking the silence in a way that the Emperor's had not. Things moved in the shadows, crawling away from the defiling sound of speech. The Emperor walked among the stilled Endry. The sand had blighted everything, even down here, running his gauntleted touch along the fire-blackened metal. "Sire, what is happening? Why am I here?" "Do you recognize any of this machinery?" Diocletian let his gaze roam over the cavern's wreckages. "No, my liege, I do not." The Emperor kept walking, moving from structure to structure, the way a man might browse the aisles of a librarium. The thunder that shouldn't be audible this deep in the earth rumbled louder than before. "There are those in the cult mechanicum, among the unifiers, that surmise I found the core of the golden throne here, beneath the sands of Terra. A relic, they venture, of the Dark Age." Diocletian wasn't sure what to say. He had witnessed uncountable hours of the Golden Throne's planning and construction process. Yet, as he said, he recognized nothing here. He didn't know if that was a flaw in his understanding of the throne's genesis amongst these machines, or simply because the machine crypt had nothing to do with the Emperor's greatest work of all. Perhaps there was merely inspiration to be found here, the Emperor mused softly. The idea taking form, based not on the successes of an ancient race, but the failures of our own. He exhaled a rueful sound, not quite a sigh, not quite a chuckle. "Did I seize machines, how they fell short of their intended purpose, and resolved to create a far superior incarnation? There is a certain poetry to that, isn't there, Diocletian? The belief that we know better than those who came before us, that we will suit a throne better than they did." "Sire, Are you well? Or perhaps the idea was mine in its entirety. Any relics of lost ages that have been proven useful for their parts, being the legacies of dead species that had the same idea, millennia before my birth. In such an instance, each race envisions its own salvation independent of the others, only to discover that other species, other empires, have already failed to save themselves." Diocletian breathed slowly in the dark. "Does it matter, sire?" The Emperor turned to him, his eyes focusing on the custodian for the first time. The war is over, Diocletian. Win or lose, Horus has damned us all. Mankind will share in his ignorance until the last man or woman draws the species' last breath. The warp will forever be a cancer in the heart of all humans. The Imperium may last 100 years, or 1,000, or 10,000, but it will fall, Diocletian. It will fall. The shining path is lost to us. Now we rage against the dying of the light. It cannot be this way. Diocletian stepped forwards, teeth clenched. It cannot. The Emperor tilted his head. No? What then do you intend to do, Custodian? How will you, with your spear and your fury and your loyalty, pull fate itself from its repeating path? We will kill Horus. Diocletian stared at his defeated monarch, illuminated in emberish light of the loom globe in his hand. And after the war, we can begin anew. We can purge the webway. The unifiers can rebuild all that was lost. Even if it takes centuries, we will strike down Horus and I will face the 16th, the Emperor interrupted, distracted once more by the machine graveyard. But there will come another to take his place. I see that now. It is the way of things. The enemy will never abate. Another will come. One who will doubtlessly learn from Horus's errors of faith and judgment. Who, my king? The Emperor shook his head. There is no way to know, and for now it is meaningless. But remember it well, we are not the only ones learning from this conflict. Our enemies grow wiser as well. Diocletian refused to concede. You are the Emperor of mankind. We will conquer any who comes against us. After the war, we will rebuild underneath your guidance. The Emperor stared at him. He spoke a question that wasn't a question, one that brooked no answer. And what if I am gone, Diocletian? The custodian had no answer. The thunder pealed above them, shaking the cavern and jarring loose a rattling hail of falling pebble dust. My king, what now? What comes next? The Emperor turned away, walking into the darkness of the cavern while the storm hammered the dead city so far above. He spoke 3 words that no custodian had ever heard him speak before. I don't know. And here, ladies and gentlemen, we come, ultimately, to the end of it all. The Emperor failed. Even if he had survived, even if he had beaten back chaos, the goal he worked for all those years was forever lost to him. Forever. Yet when looking at the master of all mankind, finally laid low, one must ask, how did it come to this? How is it that someone so great, doing something so magnificent, something that was verging on the entirety of a species' understanding of the world and the galaxy and the universe we live in, how is it that the Emperor failed? What mistake did he make? Well, pick your poison. He tried to control humanity, a race that time and time again has screamed its dying breath, purely for free will. He created demigod sons, and treated them as nothing more than tools of war, means to an end to be thrown away and spent. He was initially a man, a mortal man, a man of normality, of goodness some might say, but eventually he would throw away everything, his morals, his ethics, even his very friends, all for a purpose they could not understand. He defied logic, reason, time, nature, everything. An immortal man, lacking patience. He thought that he could simply ignore his enemies. He thought that he could ignore the demons that prowl the darkness of humanity for millennia. He thought that ignorance was a shield, rather than a trap. He thought that humanity would succeed when countless races more hallowed and ancient than ours had failed. He tried to lead the race of mankind. He tried to have it all, He wanted to be a tyrant that controlled the very universe itself, but appear as a liberating monarch. He wanted to wield the power of a god, whilst preaching atheism, truth, logic, and reason. He wanted to be a good man, whilst doing deeds of evil. He wanted to do the work that gods had failed to do, while still being a mortal man. But most damningly of all, the Emperor wanted to lead a race of men while slowly becoming anything but a man. In other words, the hubris. The sheer fucking hubris. The ununderstandable arrogance. Yet arrogance born not as it normally is, but so tragically and potent for all involved. Arrogance born out of truth. Truth of the past. Truth of the strength in acts committed. Truth in humanity, that we could achieve such a thing, that the Emperor in his strength could bring us onto such a prosperous path. That was the truth that the Emperor took and slowly construed it into an arrogant lie. For many people ask, is the Emperor evil? And ultimately, no. In my opinion, the Emperor is not an evil man. The Emperor did evil things. The Emperor has certainly earned the title of an evil tyrant. But ultimately, everything he did for us. But why? Why on earth would he do such a thing? Why would he choose this way? Why? As always, why should I tell you when he may do it for you? For the last time today, taken from Master of Mankind. It is not necessary, sire. I believe I understand now. Do you? Look across the water, Ra. Ra returned to the Emperor's side and did as he was bid. The water rippled in sedated waves, sloshing around the rocks that lined the shore. At the horizon's very edge, he could see a mirroring lip of another landmass. I see another land. An island, perhaps. This is Albia. Many thousands of years ago. But that is unimportant. You see the shore. You know it is there. You know you could reach it by ship, by swimming, or by flight. That is what you know. The Emperor's dark eyes lost their focus. He faced towards the distant shore, but Ra doubted he was still seeing it. So you journey towards it. But all you can see is your destination. You cannot see the beasts below the water that devour travelers. You cannot know if the wind will blow and throw you aside from your course. And if the wind does blow, will it send you east, west, north, south? Will it shatter your craft completely? Perhaps there are rocks beneath the water, impossible to see until they grind and tear at the hull of your ship. Perhaps the inhabitants of that far shore will fire upon your craft before you can make landfall. The Emperor turned back to Ra, though curiously, his eyes didn't clear. But you can see the shore, Ra. Did you fail to predict any of those possible flaws between here and there? Perhaps I predicted them all, sire. Perhaps I factored in the possibilities of each one occurring. Maybe so. And what of the eventualities you could not predict? Each passing moment is rich with 100,000 possible pathways. The craftswoman making your boat may suffer heart failure before she can gift it to you. Or she decides not to offer you the boat at all. You say the wrong words to her. You offer her the wrong currency. She lies to you, for she is a thief. An enemy sabotages your boat before you set sail. You reach halfway across the channel of water, only to see a more appealing coast to the east or west. Minute after minute, possibility after possibility, path after path. All variables you are unable to see from where you stand at this very moment. The Emperor reached out, as if he could crush the coast in his golden gauntlet. His expression was cold in its pale ferocity. I can see the coast, Ra. I know what awaits me there, but I cannot see all the infinite viscosities between here and there. At last, he lowered his hand. That is foresight, Ra, to know a trillion possible futures, and to be left to guess at the infinite ways of arriving at each one, to map out even one possible eventuality, by taking into account every decision that every living being will ever make. We take all the lifetimes I have already lived. The only way to know anything for certain. He trailed off, gesturing to the distant shore, is to reach the other side, said Ra. The Emperor nodded. When the vault was attacked and the Primarch project compromised, should I have destroyed them all, or do as I did, and trust that I would be able to restore them to grandeur? If I destroyed them to prevent their abduction, would the Imperium have risen as it had done now? Or would the Great Crusade have stuttered and failed without its generals? There are no answers yet, Ra. We're in the middle of the sea, beset by strange tides and unexpected beasts, but not yet thrown off course. In the end, the Emperor's greatest mistake was his arrogance. That, and unironically, in him trying to become something so much more than human, everything, his entire plan for the species, was built on something very human indeed. The idea of saying, fuck it, I'm gonna bet on myself, taking the risks, doing whatever the hell needs to be done, and simply thinking, I will win. Well, the only difference between a bold man and a fool is the fact that the fool failed. The Emperor of all mankind took a gamble, and damn it, he lost. But what is more human than looking at everything going around you, and in spite of logic and reasoning, taking the plunge, betting on yourself, and fighting the good fight, for if no other bloody reason than you're here and you're now, and goddammit are you bored. So in the end, the Emperor of all mankind is many things, but the one thing that caused him to fail in this endeavor was the fact that he was still human, was the fact that he was still arrogant. And that was the Emperor's greatest mistake, his humanity, his arrogance, his sheer, unrivaled, unmatched, uncontained arrogance. But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so very much for watching. I do hope you enjoyed today's video. Let me know down below. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? What do you guys think about the Emperor? I'd love to hear all your thoughts down below. But ladies and gentlemen, I want to say a massive thank you to you guys for watching. But even more massive thank you to my awesome members and Patreons. Shout out to a brand new member, Mr. Adrian von Thuren. Goeiemorgen meneer, hoe gaat het met jou? Is hij een Afrikaanse mensen? Either way, what kind bro? And welcome to the family. Massive shout out to my officer corps, starting at the captain tier, Miss Tori. We then have our lieutenant tier with Mr. Eddie V3, Miss Major of the Void, Mr. Curtis Studies, and Miss Tori. Massive shout out to my sergeant tier members, Mr. Damiak, Mr. Warsmith the Fireheart, Mr. Andy McGee, Mr. Bowen, Mr. Sean RL7, and Mr. Matthew Merrill. Massive shout out to my corporal tier members, Mr. Tremaine the Math Kitty, Mr. Lord Rosarius, Mr. Tech Priest Toaster, Mr. Bowen, Miss Shauna Smithers, the Gentle Salamander, the Winch of Warhammer, and finally, but absolutely not least, shout out to my amazing privateer members, Mr. Thomas Moslons, Mr. Ivan _SVW, Mr. Monkey Man, Mr. Michael Ayeda, Mr. Diego Castro, Mr. Fortisunum, Mr. CMD Nay, Mr. Eric Massaro, Mr. Dom Marek, Mr. Ken _Sakura333, and Mr. Matthew Peter. Thank you, each and every one of you. I love you and I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for doing this. It means the world to me. You guys are amazing. Sign up today with our memberships. You get a bunch of awesome benefits, behind the scenes stuff, early access videos, member only content, and if you sign up with our captain tier, you get one video idea submitted to me that I will do as soon as I can. But remember, this will always be free. So whether you give your boy $1 or not, I would love you just the same. Mwah! But ladies and gentlemen, I've been the General Brother 101. You've been beautiful, awesome, and amazing people. Thank you all so very much for watching. We'll make sure to say hello out there, boys and gals. And I will catch y'all next time. Dismiss, Rangers. Bro, I still cannot believe it. The Christian straight up was like, yo homie, you good? And Biggie was like, nah fam, my shit espresso. I'm not God because gods aren't real.